You're half in, you're half out. You think it keeps you safe, but actually it's killing your relationships. Sitting on the fence waiting for evidence, some sort of God-given sign for this is right for you. Most of your attention lands on evidence that it's not quite right. And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety for you. And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety for your partner. Every time you half commit, you find yourself teaching your nervous system you don't know how to commit. And this becomes your reality. Freedom actually keeps life shallow. Commitment gives us deeper experiences of life. You want a calm, peaceful, easeful relationship. But the truth is, if you're doing this as a man, it actually leads to you creating the very dynamic for a terrible relationship. What you can do to combat this half in, half out. I think the most important thing is, I'm going to explain why being on the fence, right, creates your fears to come true, damages your relationship, bleeds out your dating life, right? And I'm going to give you a simple plan to create change, to help you with this problem of being half in, half out, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? And I say this as somebody who did this for the best part of a decade in my relationships, right? And now I have been coaching men for the last, on and off for the last kind of almost 15 years, right? And particularly in the last 5 years, been focusing on this particular problem men have of being half in, half out, unsure, overthinking, trying to figure out the relationship's right. So stay tuned. Right. I'm David Chambers, and this is the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers, and I dive into men's stuff, around relationship, dating, and intimacy. Right. But this is something that's really close to my home, right? Close to home to me, because this is something that I struggled with for so many years, right? So many years of being like, oh, I'm just going to wait and see if this relationship is right. I'm going to have this holding pattern and see if this is the right person for me, right? And doing this time and time again and seeing the same pattern play out. And for many years, I was like, oh, that's proof that relationship wasn't right for me, or this person wasn't right for me, or I shouldn't date that person. But what I came to see later on was I was the one that was causing the problem. I was the one that was creating the stress and anxiety for myself and crazy making for my female partners, which then created stress and drama for me, which I didn't like, which often repelled me. So in fact, I create the drama myself, right? And this is gonna, for some of you, this is gonna be really hard to hear, right? But like I said, it's a pattern I've got out of. I've been in a relationship for 5 years now, so happy days. So let's define 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's this kind of behavior of, in relationship or dating, they're on a continuum to me, really. You start dating someone and then slowly you fade into a relationship, right? You're in a relational situation, and where you are often overthinking a lot. Oh, is this right for me? Is it wrong for me? Is it right for me? Yes, she's right for me. No, she's not right for me, right? I'm talking from the male perspective. There's no reason why this couldn't be the same thing with women. I know it definitely is, because I've coached some of them as well. You're in this kind of in and out situation, or you're on the fence, sitting on the fence, waiting for evidence or some sort of God-given sign for this is right for you, right? And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety for you. And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety for your partner, right? It can sometimes look like not wanting any labels, not being willing to commit to plans and future plans, or it's leading to, right? So when you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you might be telling yourself, oh, I can't make a future plan because I don't know if I'm going to still be in this relationship, right? I did this so much. Oh, I'm unsure. I have some doubts about the relationship or the person I'm dating. So I don't want to plan anything beyond a month or a week ahead, even, right? Because if I end it, I don't want to have to cancel the plans or upset the person, it's that sort of thing. And it's this kind of constant being unwilling to really be with the future as well, right? This 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And sometimes people are in relationship and they still make plans, but they're still kind of half-hearted. And there's an energetic part to this, right? Because there's the action I talked about. Then there's an energetic part where your energy isn't really in the relationship. Part of your, as they say, is one eye is on the exit, right? Inside a book called Getting the Love You Want. It's a relationship book, which I think is fantastic, and I've used it, and it's helped me in my relationship and the clients I've worked with. It talks about closing exits, and some of those exits are energetic. For some people, that energetic is I'm still fantasize about my ex, or I'm still, when I'm out and about, thinking I'm meeting these women and oh, she could be really amazing for me, right? I've spoken to guys about this one, where they meet someone, They spent 20 minutes with them, an hour maybe, and they're like, this woman could have been so perfect for me. You know, she's better than my partner, right? Those sorts of things. That's the sort of thing that's happening. So that's the energetic, where it's just like you're always kind of like waiting for something. And the part of the energy also is this thing I mentioned before, which is like you're scanning for evidence that this relationship is right or wrong, right? And you generally find, right, that most of your attention lands on evidence that it's not quite right. I bet that's what you find, right? You generally like, there's so much that's not right with the relationship, and there's so little things that are wrong. There's so little things that are right and very few things that are, I've said that completely wrong. There's so little things that are right and there's many things that are wrong. That's what I was trying to say. This constant kind of energetic kind of like holding pattern. I call it a holding pattern. You know, like when you're flying and you're about to land and they can't land, so they just circle you around the airport for minutes, hours. I once had a time where I lived in Madeira, as some of you know. I don't live there anymore, but that airport is particularly fraught because if it's really windy, they can't land. And a number of times I found myself spinning in the air for 30, 40 minutes, and then once or twice I had to fly back to the UK once, and once to Tenerife, and once back to Faro in Portugal, but that's a completely different thing. But this holding pattern of just like waiting, right? And let's describe it actually for the partner, I'm always going to refer to the woman just because that's, you know, most of the people listen to podcasts are men, and I'm a man, and that's my experience. What you're also, she's experiencing is this just like hot and cold, yeah, push pull constantly. One day she's with you and like, he's really into it, he's really open, he's talking like, great, this is really fun. And then the next day you're just cold and nothing's happening, and she's like, what's wrong? And it's this constant like connection, disconnection, connection, disconnection, connection, disconnection. You get the drift, right? And that is incredibly destabilizing for a person, right? For a woman to be in, because she doesn't know where she stands with you, right? She wants to lean in and care for you and love you more and be in the relationship more, but your energy is back and forth, and that can literally make someone feel crazy, right? Because they're always continually thinking about the relationship. Is it okay? Is it not okay? Today's okay, tomorrow's okay. It's just like back and forth, right? Because what you're really doing is you're taking her on this ride like a puppet master that you unconsciously don't realize you're doing. Is like your thinking is making you go from side to side. Yes, no, like a pendulum. And she's dragging along underneath you, right? And she doesn't have any control, right? And that's incredibly destabilizing. It creates a lot of anxiety, of stress, of worry. You know, there'll be a lot of tears. There's going to be a lot of outbursts. There's like an emotional reactivity. Like it's really, you know, it's very destabilizing for someone, right? So what we're going to talk about, so now we've defined it, what it looks like, what it feels like. And for you, the person who's experiencing this, it's this, I kind of describe, I feel like it's saying it again, but it's like you're unsure and you're looking for evidence of, is this right? Is it wrong? It's this constant search for evidence. And newsflash, man, your brain is wired to look for negativity, right? Because that's how we're wired up. So you find more negativity because part of you is looking for it, because part of you wants to eject. Because the truth is that you find relationships difficult. You find them uncomfortable. You find them too close, engulfing, fear about losing yourself, fear about losing freedom, which we'll touch on a bit later on, right? This whole situation feels really stressful for you, right? You're wanting to get it right. I want to meet the right woman. You know, I've done a podcast a long time ago about that, actually, with Connor Beaton, about, you know, choosing the right woman. And it's something as men who have this dynamic going on for them, it's a big stress for us, this fear of like getting it wrong. What happens if I get it wrong and I marry the wrong woman, and we project into the future, I marry the wrong woman and then I'm really unhappy, and then we have children and they're miserable, and like my whole life is miserable. But the truth is you're projecting all these feelings, this story forward, as if you are powerless in the situation, as if you can't do anything, right? That's the way you're kind of talking about it. So, the loop, the self-fulfilling prophecy loop, right? So, it starts with underlying, right? There's a fear of pain, for you. Like fear of pain is your fear of hurt yourself. There's a fear of intimacy and closeness, fear of, getting the relationship wrong, whatever that fear is, but there's some fear there. And usually this layered, right? There's usually this top line layer of like, I don't want to hurt them. I'm afraid of hurting her. I don't want to hurt her. So it's best that I make my decision reasonably quickly, right? Or you don't really do it quickly. You just find yourself going in and out a lot, right? But actually underneath that layer is a fear of closeness, right? A fear of intimacy. And I think deeper underneath that, nearly always with the men that I've investigated, is this fear of being hurt themselves and not being able to recover, not being able to deal with it in some way that they often feel they experience as a child, or they've experienced in past relationships where they got hurt and it was incredibly overwhelming. And I think that's the key part. There's some past experience of emotional overwhelm through pain, sometimes abandonment, sometimes rejection, but that's what sits underneath. So this all leads to overthinking, lots of overthinking, right? Okay, I need to get it right. Is she the right person? Oh, she snores a bit funny. Oh, she does this a bit strange. Oh, but she's really beautiful. Oh, we had a really good time. And you're just constantly going back and forth in this energy, right? And then you're half committed to things, like you half commit to dates. You don't seem that keen. She's like, oh, do you want to plan to go on holiday? And you're like, yeah, that'd be really nice. No commitment, no follow through, right? And then she's like, oh, what's going on? She's having a lot of this like back and forth of like 1 minute he's keen, 1 minute he's not. And she's asking lots of questions. She's trying to find things out. You find that to be frustrating, right? So she's sensing inside there like a threat, a worry, a concern, like what am I doing wrong? What's going wrong here? So she senses a threat. So her senses are kind of on high alert, and then she becomes ultra sensitive to you, right? Because you're inconsistent. She becomes ultra sensitive to your movements in and out. And it can just literally be in 5 minutes, a look that you give, or, the way that you eat your food, because she's now like on this pendulum, right? And she's trying to find some stability and make sense. So she becomes hypersensitive. And then because of the hypersensitivity, there's usually conversations happening that you find difficult and uncomfortable. So you try and push away, right? And then that creates ruptures. And then that rupture usually is proof to you that the commitment is risky or unsafe or ill-advised, right? And this loop can go round for fucking ever, right? Because you're like, this is why it's not right. And then something comes up and you reconnect in some way, often without any real repair, right? Often you're scared to actually say, this is how I'm feeling, right? You don't say it to her. You don't mention it. You just think about it a lot, right? You spend a lot of time thinking about it, don't you? You must feel like I'm in your head right now because, like I said, I've worked with a lot of men in this situation. And you get back into loop, you start enjoying it again, you get close again, and then the fear starts coming up, and then we're back into the cycle, right? So, and then there's a painful part that you're probably unaware of, is that every time you half commit, every time you're like half committed, half in, half out, you find yourself like teaching your nervous system, right? This whole system that runs through the body, connected to the head, connected through the spine, all through the body. You're teaching your nervous system that you don't know how to commit. Yeah? You teach it that you don't know how to commit because you don't commit. You stay half-hearted, right? And then when you pay attention to the times where, there's proof that commitment is risky, you then on top of that teach your nervous system, your body, your emotional body, that commitment is risky, right? So you start to over-index, right, on commitment is risky, and that I don't know how to commit, right? And this becomes your reality, right? You probably listen to this thinking, oh shit, yeah, because it becomes your reality, because the option that you never take is actual commitment. So this one is like, imagine I'm going to give a really good gym analogy here. Imagine you don't do legs. Yeah, so your legs are like little sticks. But you do biceps and chest all the time. So biceps and chest are strong. Those are strong, your go-to muscles, right? They're easy for you to lift and do things. But legs, you put off by that. You don't do legs very often. You don't do it well. That's how it is. The muscle of commitment is weak for you, right? That's a huge part of what's happening here. So how does this impact? I'm going to talk about relationships. I'm going to talk about dating. I'm going to talk about self as well. This ambiguity, as I've touched about, this like uncommitment, right, in relationships, it just kills polarity. It kills calm and peace. And the funny thing is that you want calm and peace. You want a calm, peaceful, easeful relationship. But can you see how your lack of commitment makes this woman crazy, this other guy crazy, depending on your sexual preferences? You makes her crazy because you're so inconsistent that she can't rely on you. She can't come to meet you one evening and be like, I know he's going to be caring and loving and thoughtful, and he's going to keep leaning into this relationship because the last 4 times she's seen you, you've been in, out, in, out. That's the energy she's felt, right? Because if it's going through your mind, the energy is felt because you're not following through with actions. You'll be like, I could kiss her. I could go home with her tonight and we could have sex and sleep together. But that could give her the wrong impression. Oh no, I better back away, right? That's what you do. So this becomes crazy making for her. So she starts to maybe be on guard a little bit. She might be a bit standoffish, right? She might be quick to conflict, right? Disagreements might come up quite often. There might be some nitpicking from her even, right? And all of these go in your little evidence bag to prove that this isn't a good relationship, right? But again, the thing you're not looking at is your own actions and how they have consequences in the world and in the relationship. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to your consequences in a little bit, right? So the consistency makes her crazy. It really disrupts her nervous system because her nervous system is looking for some level of safety and consistency, right? Especially if she's anxiously attached. The chances are, newsflash, if you're doing this as a man, you're avoidant attachment. That's most likely what's there, right? It might be an avoidant attachment that's always been there, or it might have developed over time through relationships and pain and breakups, or it might just be you've been anxious in the past and you've met somebody that you actually feel like you could be with, and you switch into being more avoidant to protect yourself from some imagined pain, right? So you're in this situation, right? And you're not making plans. And then that then adds to her stress and worry. She's like, why doesn't he want plans? Does he not care about me? And then you're like, I really care about you. I really enjoy spending time with you. But you won't make any plans for next week. You won't introduce them to your friends, your family. Like, all these actions you're doing are really inconsistent. Or maybe it's time for you to propose, or it's time for you guys to move in. I can tell you this moving in one happened to me many times of being like, I don't know, is she right for me? Like, I don't like she does these things, but I like the way she does those things. Does she have enough ambition? That's another one that comes up for a lot of clients. Does she have enough ambition and drive? Or, does she look after herself physically? Like physically, gym, exercise, those sorts of things. These are the things that often the concern I can see come up for myself in the past and other men, right? So you start to create this relationship where it's super inconsistent. She's on edge. You're to be honest, you're actually quite on edge, but you don't necessarily realize because maybe you suppress the emotions and all you do is experience your thoughts. And there's a part of you that believes, if I just think about this enough, I'm going to solve this problem. If I just observe enough, sitting on the fence enough, I'm going to see the truth of the reality. You kind of act as if it's a football game. And if you watch the football, you're going to get a complete understanding of the picture, right? And we're going to later tell you how wrong that is. So if we look at dating now, and I guess this isn't too different from the relationship bit, but the thing with dating is that there's the early stage of dating, especially where, you're trying to get to know somebody, like who are they, what are they about, what are they like? And that becomes really difficult if someone is inconsistent. Yeah. And it can come up for you. It sometimes might be coming up for you in the dating where it's like, I'm getting to know her. This is really cool. And then you'll suddenly get afraid about being so close or not feeling relationship ready or feeling good enough. That's another one that comes underneath. The underneath beliefs, these kind of dysfunctional beliefs is, I don't know if I'm good enough for her. That's one that comes. I've known men to say to women, I don't think I'm good enough for you. That's why I can't, commit, because the assumption there is that she's going to reject you at some point later when she finds out the thing that you fear about yourself, that you're not good enough, right? So in dating, you might be doing this whole thing of like messaging like really inconsistently, cancelling plans, right? Maybe it's something you're often doing in this dating stage, cancelling plans, not giving direction to things, you know, inconsistent behavior like, oh, I'm not going to be free for 3 weeks. But then one night you get drunk in that 3 weeks and you're like, oh my God, I really miss her. I want to see her. And you call her at 2 o'clock in the morning. She says, yes, you go around, you have sex, you wake up, you feel guilty. Yes, I've been there, right? I've been there. And the thing is, you end up in this stage also in dating where you don't want to put any label on things. You don't want to be like, oh, is this my partner? Or you get really tetchy if they ask where things are going. It's this general feeling of struggling to commit, right, in dating. And one of the things, I guess this starts to talk into the impact on you, is you struggle to commit to things in life, right? To living in a particular country sometimes, to living in a house, to buying a house, to signing contracts. You know, for me, it even showed up as I didn't work in a permanent job for the best part of, 12 or so years. I just wanted this freedom, right? I just wanted to be free. But the impact on you of this hot and cold is that you feel really guilty. You feel really bad often because you can see how badly you treat people. You treat the women you're with. You feel really guilty. And it kind of reinforces a belief that might exist for you, right? That there's something bad about you. I think a lot of men have this now. When I speak to, there's this some belief in them that I am bad. And I believe one of the causes of this, it's not the sole cause, is just the general negative rhetoric about men, that men are bad. We grew up, learning that we're bad in some way because we hear it everywhere. Men are trash, men are rapists, men are predators, like, oh, he's just being a man, all these things. I think we internalize that. And I've been meaning to look into see if there's some studies around that. I did have a quick look not long ago and I saw how it helps if a boy grows up in a house where there's lots of man bashing and negative views on men, then it can affect his self-esteem. So this is something I see, and it feeds into this, I am bad. There's something wrong with me, right? That underlying belief. And I say this isn't that positive beliefs that you have when you're feeling good about yourself and happy about your life. This is when you start to question when you're feeling, the voice, the kind of inner critic, when it's talking to you when you make a mistake, you do something wrong, the way it talks to you and the beliefs that it holds. So it kind of erodes away at your confidence. It erodes away at your self-esteem. It erodes away at those legs. Yeah. What did I say about legs? The commitment muscle. Because you don't do it, because you always avoid it, you don't even know how to do it. Right. And some of the guys I meet, what happens is they actually find themselves then on the receiving end of this behavior, right? The hot, cold behavior. And sometimes that can be a big catalyst for change. But often they really struggle in that because they don't have the kind of emotional capacity to find groundedness, right, in it, right? Because that's another part of this kind of practice is this thinking instead of feeling. Yeah, the thing you do here, this hot and cold, on and off, half in, half out, is thinking instead of feeling, right? And negative projection. So this is more impact on you. It's like there's always this negative projection of how things are going to be. There's an assumption of negativity. There's even a view on seeing things in the relationship, in the person you're dating. You see the negative aspects of what they're doing far more than the positives, right? And you overweight on those negatives as well. It's something you're doing. And then there's another impact is that you probably look back, right, in the past with some limerence, which is kind of like this mild obsession of like, oh my God, that woman I dated a year ago, she was perfect for me. Why did I mess it up? How did I do that? I'm going to try and get her back. Or you just fantasize about them, right? This is something I've known guys who looking back 10, 15 years to women, right? So this is a really important aspect, is like noticing there's a part of you that's always like, oh, in hindsight, you can see how shitty your behavior was and how you were caught in overthinking or you were just making things up. But in the moment, you can't see it. All you can see is the bullshit. All you can see is the story, the negativity and everything, right? So what underpins this, right? As I've mentioned, underpinning this is definitely avoidant attachment. This is like, I'd say this is one of the primary patterns of avoidant men. I say this as a former avoidant man or recovering avoidant man, whatever phrasing you prefer. And I don't use avoidance as something negative, right? I coach avoidant men. I've got a whole program for them, breaking the chains of avoidance, which is a program I've run 3 times now, guiding avoidant men into secure ways of being, into secure attachment, helping them communicate, open up, express themselves, and so forth. And if that's something you're really interested in, really tackling this, I'm running that again in September, starting on the 24th. And if you're interested, then you probably want to get in contact with me now, because space is going to fill up. It's limited spaces. It's an amazing program. And we can have a conversation about that, because just listening to podcasts and reading books isn't going to solve your problem. And as I'll mention in this. So one of the underpinning things is avoidant attachment, which is about kind of leaning away from intimacy and closeness at its basic level. That's the kind of thing, leaning away from togetherness. But inside of the avoidant attachment, one of the things we really over-index on, and that's particularly avoidant men, is this freedom. If I can be free, then I can be happy. Yeah, because usually what experience is that at some point we felt some level of lack of freedom in our lives, usually childhood, right? And we felt bound, we felt burdened, and we don't want to feel like that way. And often some of that freedom is we don't want to burden other people. It's a very common thing as well, right? But we have this myth that if I'm free, then I can do what I want and then I'll be happy, right? And I can tell you, as someone who at one point in my life, I was so free that time wasn't a restriction to me and money wasn't a restriction to me. And I wasn't a millionaire by any stretch of imagination, but I was traveling around the world and I was in South America and I had tens of thousands of pounds in my bank account and I was in South America. I could basically do what I wanted in South America. I didn't need to buy a house there. I was staying in hotels and hostels and I could go out and eat and wherever I wanted to. And my whole perception of my life started to shift. Right. But most people never get to time and money independence, because time and money are the things that actually hold us in our Western society, especially. Right. So there's this myth of freedom. If I can be free, I can be happy. And if I commit, then that's going to remove freedom from my life. I'm not going to be able to sleep with who I want. I'm not going to be able to go and do what I want or go be where I want. Right. That is this myth that freedom will lead to happiness, and commitment erodes at freedom. Right. And I'm here to tell you an update is like, when you are so focused on freedom and doing whatever you want, you don't commit to anything, which means there's no depth and it's just lots of shallow experiences. I'll say that again. When you don't commit to anything, right, you sit on the fence constantly and you miss out on the depth of experience that's available when you go in. Whether that's a relationship, you're probably seeing your friends getting married, having kids, going on holiday, having adventures, doing up houses, and you're still stuck renting a house, for instance, renting a room, still going on lots of first, second, third dates. You're on repeat. You literally got a song on repeat, which is shallow life experiences. Right. And it's not a judgment. I did this for many years and they can feel tweaked and interesting, right? Sleeping with different women, having different bars and clubs, but you lack the depth of really going in. And if you see this half in, half out in your career, because I did this, I was a contractor and I did the same job in different places for the best part of 10 years. But I had the same job title pretty much, right? And then I was seeing my peers, people I worked with, and I see them now, they're like director of testing, director of engineering, all sorts of things like that, because they went deep, because they committed, right? And now I'm seeing for myself, like I'm in a relationship and my relationship is probably one of the most free relationships that people have designed, but this is by design, right? I went to Thailand with some friends earlier this year and me and also had a conversation. It's like, cool, you're in Thailand, great. Right. I want to, go to the gym 3 times a week. I'm going to the gym 3 times a week. And I've got a little boy, right? Commitment doesn't remove freedom, right? It does remove choices. Like, I'm not going to go and sleep with 15 women next month, right? Because I've chosen not to, because I've chosen to go deeper into this thing, right? So freedom actually keeps life shallow, and commitment gives us deeper experiences of life, right? And this can be really hard for us to understand, because when we're on this trap of like, should I commit, should I not commit to this person? We think that staying on the fence will lead to an answer, but it doesn't. It leads to a non-answer, which is an answer in itself, but it leads to this neutrality, unsureness. But it actually leads to you creating the very dynamic for a terrible relationship, because you create no safety. Your connection is inconsistent. You're untrustworthy. You're unreliable, right? You probably don't communicate enough. Yeah. And those are the things that someone who's dating you is going to be like, that's not what I want in a partner. Right? And those are skills you can learn, right? To communicate better, to, lean in when you're unsure, to commit to things and so forth. But the key thing you have to really start to get to grips with, and now we're getting into like what you can do to combat this half in, half out, is actually getting comfortable with uncomfortable emotions. It sounds so basic, right? But it's incredibly nuanced and important. Can you lean in when you're like, oh, I'm unsure, but I care about this person, I'm going to lean in? And I hear the little voice in your head saying, oh, but that's misleading them, right? But it's not necessarily misleading them, because everybody has doubts, right? You're never going to be 100% certain about most decisions in life, right? You're not going to be 100% certain. You never will be, right? Jobs, things I've done, starting podcasts, changing career, I've never been 100% certain, right? But one of the things you have to also do with this being okay with being uncertain and leaning in and being committed, because our action follows our experience follows our action. So if you're committed, you have the experience of being committed, of being in, you take the actions of being in, then you feel more in, right? And you're going to go, oh, I tried that once, but I bet you tried it for about 3.5 days. You didn't give it a go for 2 months, right? Or if you did for 2 months, you spent so much time going, oh, but I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. You allowed your brain to keep shifting back to the unsureness, right? This is the key thing. You commit and be in and go, okay, I'm in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow through with this, see how this feels. But you have to learn to be with the uncomfortable emotions. You have to train your nervous system to stay with the uncomfortability and even the unsureness, because one of the things that you're probably doing is every time you feel unsure, you go into overthinking. The thing you avoid doing is feeling what's underneath that, because you don't want to feel, because it's uncomfortable and you don't like uncomfortable emotions. So you just go into thinking. So this is one of the key things, is being okay with the uncomfortable emotions and leaning into them, allowing our nervous system to hold uncomfortable emotions, and then add on top of that, share them with somebody else. Oof, yes, I hear you. Share them with somebody else. Because when you start to do that, you become relational, right? And then the fears you have in your head stop being so massive, and they actually start to calm down. And there's very practices way to do that. And I'm not going to go into that in this podcast. And like I said, I cover that in Breaking the Chains of Avoidance, communication patterns and so forth, right? But you have to lean into the emotion and feeling. And that's the really difficult part for you, most likely, because it feels excruciatingly painful. And all you can hear is your mind telling you this is the wrong thing to do. So how do you start to change this? If you're dating someone or you're in a relationship with somebody, what can you do? A little plan, right? You have to decide on a container to be in, right? So that could be, okay, for the next month, I'm 100% in. 100. If the thoughts of being out come across my mind, I'm just going to let them go and then come back to the actions of being in. And if I'm like, oh, that's leading them on and all these things, no, you're choosing to be in. I think one of the things that we do as well is we think that we should follow our feelings, when as I said before, our feelings very often follow our actions, right? And this is no different, because you're atrophied in that old commitment legs, right? No training and leg day. It's weak, so the commitment feels it's just very hard to stand on the legs of commitment, because they get wobbly and shaky, and wobbly and shaky just goes back to the old stronger parts, chest and biceps, as I think I said before, right? Of like being half in, because that feels easier. It feels more comfortable. And really what we're trying to do is train legs for 30 days, right? So for 30 days, you go, who do I want to be? Who would I be if I was a man who was 100% committed to this woman, to this relationship, to this dating situation? What do? You know, I might write a list like, okay, I'd plan dates. I'd book things into the future. I would be in contact with them. I would show up. I would talk to them how I feel, blah, blah, blah. All this, you do it. You do all those things. You do all those things. You just stay in. Maybe you want to do some journaling in the morning, like, I'm having these fears come up and blah, blah, blah. But what we want to separate is between the fears and the overthinking, right? And you, the light witness of you that's observing those, that you are not your thoughts and feelings. You're not your fears and worries. They are something you're experiencing that is being triggered by some childhood stuff, some stuff from the past, right? Another thing after the container is to really look at your language that you're using, both with yourself and with your partner. You want to start getting out with this maybe language and I'll see and I'll let you know language, which is really unmasculine language, if I'm honest, right? It's very non-committed. It's very kind of adolescent behavior, right? To clear communication. Yes, I will. I am. Let's do this. Let's book this then. Directional, right? This will make a huge difference to the people that receive. This is a great dating tip in general. Clear language, directional language for men goes so far. The women I speak to, the one thing they say is, men, you just lack direction. You're just too flimsy. You're like, oh, yeah, we'll see. And all this like neutral maybe language, right? Options open language, right? Which is part of this 1 foot in, 1 foot out, thinking about other options, right? For 30 days, you close off other options. Like I said at the beginning, you close off the exits, the energetic exits, right? And part of the energetic exits are thinking. And for some of you, energetic exits will be porn as well, right? Because that's a way where we leak a lot of energy out of our relationships. So you're going to clean up your language. And then you are going to be really diligent about staying in this, right? And then when you do fall out, is noticing the fear, what's there, right? Doing some practices to strengthen the nervous system, the ability to stay with the intensity, with what's there, the feeling and so forth, right? I'm not going to give you those practices here because I don't have the time. You know, these things are multi-level practices. And like I said, I do those inside of breaking the chains of avoidance, right? So you lean into the practice, you build up your tolerance to stay in connection because that's where you're weak, staying in connection, right? And then I think the most important thing is accountability, right? You have people or persons in your life that you say, this is the thing I'm doing. I need to check in with you. I need to be held accountable because it's going to be easy for me to backslide and just go back to my old inconsistent ways, right? And this is why, you know, I run the programs I run, because men, we need accountability, because when we're not accountable, we get lazy. We're not accountable. We just fall into our old patterns and we're like, oh my God, how did I get here? And it's like, well, this is what you always do, right? So this is the key aspect, is like accountability, choosing the container, cleaning up the language, right? Having a practice to strengthen the nervous system and be with the uncomfortability. These are the keys to changing this habit, right? But if you try and do this silently on your own, I'm not saying you're guaranteed to fail, but I don't know many people that have really got through this, right? Because all that happens is you fall back into your old patterns and you don't have the tools and the awareness and someone to kind of figuratively slap you in the face when you do it, because you're able to kind of hide it and just go return back into overthinking. Right? So a little summary of today. What have we talked about? We've defined what in and out is, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We've talked about the self-fulfilling prophecy loop of pain, of half committing, of causing pain to the woman you're with, inconsistent behavior, the ruptures it causes, and then the proof it creates. We've talked about, you know, the muscles, the legs being untrained, that's the commitment muscle, and the inconsistent muscle, the fence, being on the fence muscle, and the, what was the other one I said? The overthinking muscle are really well groomed. So we go to them. The neuro pathways in your brain, they go down the pathways that are most well trodden, right? So overthinking and non-committal are probably really well trodden. You've been doing them for years. You've been doing them since childhood. We talked about the impact on dating, you know, this half in, half out, someone being able to not really be able to get to know you, avoiding labels, avoiding plans, coming across as a man who doesn't really have any direction, doesn't want to organize things. That pushes women away as well. We talked about how it happens in relationship and how that can be really destabilizing. Remember the pendulum? You're controlling the pendulum and they're just on it for a ride and they don't know where they are. So it's crazy making. So she probably can be really emotionally reactive and emotional. And as I said, you want peace, but you're creating the lack of peace in your life by the way you're acting. We talked about the fallacy of freedom and how really we think freedom is keeping all our options open when freedom is actually making a choice of the things we're going to go deep in, right? It's a bit like, I use a coding example because I know a lot of you guys are software people. It's like trying to learn every single coding language there is instead of really going deep on 2 or 3, right? And becoming real master of those and getting the experience of becoming masterful of those. And then we talked about how to change it. Sorry, we talked about the impact on you and the various aspects, the fear, the worry, the stress, the volatile relationships, the lack of self-belief, how that erodes, right? And then we talked about how you can get out of it, the container, the language, looking at behavior, strengthen the nervous system, and accountability. And as I said, the accountability is really offered in Breaking the Chains of Avoidance, which is on the 24th of September. So yeah, in down below, in the comment section, let me know, where did this resonate? Where are you doing this? What's been your struggle? What's been the impact on you? Right? And as I said, if you're interested in the Breaking Chains of Avoidance, which has been a really phenomenal program for a lot of men, this is, you know, one of the only ways to work with me one-to-one and this at the moment. Then, you know, dive below, click down. There's going to be a link down below, take you to the page. You can send me an email. My email address is there as well. We can have a chat about suitability, and just know that there's currently a discount because it's early doors, but also I offer payment plans. You can pay over anything from 1 payment up to 9 months. So, because it can change your life. You know, there's men who've got into relationship who have been scared for many years who, after being in the program. So this shit works. So great to have you. I'll say ciao for now. And I'll see you next time around.